Afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our today's webinar on communication passports. So I'm Jess. I work in the support team here at Smartbox. Sure I spoke to many of you. So today we're going to have a look at communication passports as a whole, but also how we can use Grid 3 and the tools available in Grid 3 and Grid for iPad to build a communication passport. So when I first created a communication passport many years ago, I spent a lot of time looking at the resources available from places like Communication Matters and Call Scotland, which we'll have a look at a bit later. And essentially that's where we've built our template from, which we're going to be working on today. So for those of you wondering what a communication passport is, essentially it's a practical approach, person-centred, to sharing information about that individual and their communication and needs. So the communication passport does this by describing the person's most effective method and means of communication to make yourselves better communication partners, and also just general information about the individual, so who the important people are in their lives and generally any important information you need to know. So what their disabilities are there any medical needs that are important to know? So not just that basic, they're an eye gaze user, this is their yes and no, just general bits of information about them. I also think it's really important to include information from the individual themselves. So we'll have a look today at the benefits of using Grid, as I said before, but actually asking the individual, what do you want to include? What's important for people to know about you? So when would you use a communication passport? I've got some examples here. So this is one here that's used predominantly in medical services, so things like a hospital. So it's got things you must know about me, things that are important to me, and my likes and dislikes. Here you can see it's just some really general information, what your support needs are, really medical specific information, and then generally onto your sort of communication stuff. So obviously this is very specific, this example. This one's available from the widget website as a free download. But today we're going to have a look at building a much more general standard resource and a lot more simplified than this. So something that you can just have available to quickly give to people, but also quickly use through the Grid. So as well as working for Smartbox, I also work for a charity based in Gloucester as a support worker. And as a support worker, we spend a lot of time with children and young people on their own, so their family or carers aren't present. Quite often we might meet them for the very first time, get a quick introduction, so parents come at drop off and say, here's some quick bits of information, but we also find it really, really useful if something like a communication passport has been done ahead of time. So this is great in a session for the very first time you meet someone, but also great for a recap tool. So as a charity, we've now started moving towards actually having a communication passport template that we encourage parents and new members, or even the individuals themselves, to fill out ahead of time, just to make this a lot easier. It's also great when we've got new staff for sort of handover and introducing the young people themselves. And this would then grow and follow with the young person through the charity, so they might join us at the toddler group and then move through the groups up until like our young adults program. And obviously as we get to know that individual, we will add more information. And that's another really important thing to say. Even within these templates, they're quite rigid, but if there's something that's important that you think is important or the person thinks is important, just include it, fit it in where you need. So, benefits of making a communication passport in Grid 3. One thing I've already said is that we can actually ask the individual what they think is important. So jumping into their communication grid and saying, right, what shall I include in this section? And then really quickly being able to jump into edit mode and add it in. Also, it's accessible. So you can actually add it into their grid set, which is what we're going to be doing today, and actually use it to tell the person their information about their communication, their likes, and just general things that are important about them. And also, obviously, the benefit of Grid's really easy to use editing workspace, which we're going to have a look at now. So we're just going to start off in Grid Explorer. Today we're going to be working on a template we've already made here at Smartbox, and it's available on online grids. So to access online grids, go to menu, add grid sets, and choose the option online grids. You do need access to the internet to be able to access the online grids community. Essentially, online grids is a community where anyone who has Grid 3 or Grid for iPad can make and share resources. So that might be parents, carers, teachers, us here at Smartbox, and even some of our users. To access online grids, we have some featured resources, as well as our newly added resources. And we can see here is the template for My Communication Passport. We will be featuring this after the webinar, so it will be available for a couple of weeks to access, but you can also use the search facility to find things. Get a really brief description of what this grid set is about. So obviously you know it's a communication passport because that's what you're all here for. Some information about what the communication passport is, and then generally what is available to work with and who it's by. Put it in. It's now available in Grid Explorer. I can open it up. Perfect. So here is our layout. We've tried to keep things really nice and simple, but also nice size so that if someone is using their specific access method, they can use it quite easily. So let's jump into edit mode. So what you have are different sections. The sections are just color coded to make it nice and clear that they are individual of each other. We have some headings, which can be changed if there are other things that you need to include or other things that are more important. But generally, these are what the guidelines suggest. So like I said, I've done a lot of looking into communication passports as a whole, the information available from Call Scotland and the information available from Communication Matters. And this is generally what they sort of suggest. So if I did want to change one of these, I just simply go to change label. And either replace or add to information. This one obviously uses widget symbols, but if you are working with someone who uses a different symbol set, choose the symbol you want to change, go up to find picture, and choose a symbol. So I could choose a symbol sticks one or a PCS, for example. Okay, so let's just work through a few of the different options. So the first thing, obviously, it's me. I need to have some information about who I am. So I think it's always really nice to start off with a picture. Again, from experience working with individuals, we'll quite often get this information ahead of time. It's really nice to be able to identify who that child or young person is when they walk through the door. So having a nice up-to-date picture can be really helpful. I go to find picture. Again, I can use a symbol, or I could use a picture file that's available on my computer. So if I go to browse, this could be one that's on a USB, for example, and there is one of me. If I wasn't organised and I didn't have a picture already available, I could also use the camera facility and take a picture of myself. So my name is, again, really simple to edit. It's just using our write text command, which you can easily edit just by changing the label of the cell. So my name is Jess. So depending on the young person you work with, you might want this to just be text, or it might be that you need a symbol to support that as well. Again, that's really up to you. I am. And you see here, I'm not actually deleting the text and retyping it. To save time, I am just adjusting it. So that's really easy to do. I'm 25 years old. My favourite activities are, so you can see here, I click change label, it's highlighted the whole text. If I start typing now, it would replace what's already in that box. Or I can just place my cursor and edit what's already there. Another really handy tip for grid, here I've just got a block of text, but you might want that a little bit clearer in form of, for example, bullet points. That's nice and easy as well. I could have done. I press Shift on my keyboard and then Enter. It will go down to the next level. So just space these things out a little bit just to make them a little clearer. I like. I like lots of things, but we've just had a yummy lunch here in the Bristol office. So you get the idea. You can start working through adding them important bits of information. So things like that could be in the like section. It could be things like I enjoy sensory activities such as tack pack, dislikes, I don't like loud noises, and then working through the other suggestions. So you can start linking up themes. So I don't like loud noises, and if I'm upset, grab my ear defenders or take me to a quiet place, or offer me some options of different things I could do to take me out of this environment. And just generally working through them ideas so that you can build up a picture. It's not an instruction guide as such, because we all know it's really important to get to know that person. And there's a lot of things you can't fast track, you can't anticipate. But where possible, if you can help that, if you know that person really well and you really know what's going to make them tick and you really know what's going to calm them down in that situation where they're really struggling, if you can give the person that's going to be working with them, or the school they're moving to, or the day service they're going to be attending, a little bit of information up front about how they can work in them situations, it's really helpful. So obviously then we move on to things like the communication information. Really important things to include. If the person has a yes or no, include how that is. So it might be a verbal, it might be a vocalization, it might be a gesture, or it might be something as simple as a nod. Having that information written down can save time, and it can make things a lot easier in them stressful situations, or just generally when you're getting to know someone. Communicate by. If they're using eye gaze, tell them they're using eye gaze. Why don't you also include what vocabulary they're using? So if you've got someone who is going to be working really closely with a child or a young person or an adult, they could do a bit of research about the vocabulary they're using or the symbol set they're using ahead of time. Or if for any reason the device turns up and it's not turned on and the user's grid set hasn't turned up or come up automatically, that person can know what they need to do to bring it up. And I like to talk about, again, depending on the individual, they might not be motivated to communicate with them unfamiliar communication partners. So adding in some prompts in here of things that are interesting to that person. I like to talk about The Simpsons. I like to talk about what I did at the weekend. It's just generally some conversation starters. Same with the people. We all like to talk about the people in our lives. It's useful to know who them people are. It makes things a little easier. And then generally the important information about me. These are the things that you'll more commonly see on things like the medical forms, but in a little bit more detail. So the medical communication passport, like we saw before, was a lot more detailed in this section. But these are important things like here. So I might have epilepsy. I might be allergic to nuts. I wear glasses, so when they turn up and they don't have their glasses on, maybe they're in my bag. I have hearing aids, or I have a sensory processing delay. So when you talk to me, take things a little bit slower. Just generally important information. So once I finished my communication grid, it's really useful to know that there is some information built into the grid set here about what a communication passport is and how to personalise it. Obviously, if you forget, you can always watch this webinar back. But I'm happy I've added in all the information I want to add, or I'm going to come back to it later once I've had a chance to have a chat with that young person and find out what it is that we need to include. Finish editing and save my changes. I have a completely accessible, high-tech version of my communication passport. What I can now do is I can pop this into my users' communication pages, their grid set, so that they can access that information themselves, whether they won't want to show someone that there's with them the information, or actually tell them, because obviously these are write commands, so selecting them, they will speak aloud. So let's add this into SuperCore. Go to SuperCore 50. SuperCore 50 has some really useful sort of conversational control things, handy hints and things in this settings area here. So telling people about their device, it needs charging, I need help, really useful things in here. So I find that this might be quite a useful place to add in a jump to our communication passport. So if I go into edit mode, select a blank cell on this grid. So I'm just going to pop it up here and go to create cell. So we have a really useful command in Grid 3 and Grid for iPad, which we recommend people to use a lot when they're changing from one grid set to another. So rather than adding in that communication page into the grid set, which is something we could do, the much quicker, much easier way is to use what we call our change grid set command. I go to my search icon, type in the word change. Always at the bottom. We have the option here for change grid set. What I can now do is choose my grid set, my communication passport, from the drop down in the commands bar on the left hand side. Change my label. And write this in a way that it's going to make sense to the young person or the individual you're working with. If you need it just to say information about me, or about me, then that's okay. Choose an appropriate label, an appropriate symbol. I think the one I used on that top page is communication book. There it is. Finish editing. And the user now has a way that they can jump into their communication passport from their communication grid, which might be set to start on startup, for example. Go to communication passport. The important thing now is that I have a way of getting back again. So I've got to my communication passport, I've showed this to my new carer, support worker, teacher, whoever it is, but now I need a way of getting back so we can continue that communication. Or I actually might want to tell them I need to change something on here, because I used to really not like oranges, but now they're one of my favourite foods. So I need to make that update. So jump back into edit mode. Again, select a blank cell. Create cell. We're going to use the same command again, change grid set. And this time I can choose SuperCore 50 from the drop down. Again, using an appropriate label. The user doesn't need to know that they've jumped from one grid set to another. All they need to know is that this button is going to take them back to the home page of their communication grid. Again, this is all just what's going to suit the individual you're working with. Finish editing. Yes to save my changes. We can get back again. So obviously, like I just said, we've built something that's available here as a low tech. But one of the great benefits of making something that's available in Grid 3 is that you don't need to do the work twice. You don't need to be making something in a low-tech form and a high-tech form, because we now have the ability to print from Grid 3. I go to my menu bar, choose the option print, choose your printer, choose what you want to print. So I want to print this whole page, whether you want it in colour, then hit print. So then you've got a low tech that you might be able to pop in the bag with the communication aid. You might want to laminate it and tie it to the back of the wheelchair, or just generally pop them around all the different services or activities that the person attends, so that the people that are working with them have got this as a quick reference point. Like I said, from the other side of things, as someone who does work with young people with communication needs, really useful resource to have ahead of time. So that is a communication passport. As I said, the template is available on online grids to download. There are also some really, really useful resources available on the web. As I showed you before, we had the one from Widget available here. We also spoke about the resources that are available from Communication Matters website. Communication Matters is a brilliant charity. They've got loads of information about lots of communication needs and are real specialists in AAC, so augmentative alternative communication. They've got a great page here about what a communication passport is and its purpose. And then also the Cool Scotland. So Cool Scotland do a much more detailed communication passport. So much like the Widget one, it's a good couple of pages. It's a download using PowerPoint. So again, really, really easy to edit. And they also have a book. This book talks you through best practice. So if you are a therapist or you're working in a school, for example, and you're looking to be building communication passports for people for different students in your school or in your service, this is a really useful tool just to take you through good practice and generally what's good to include and what's not so good. I like this. Reflect a flavour of a person's unique character. I think that really summarises what a communication passport is about to do. It's not something clinical. It's not an instruction manual. It's really let's get to the nitty gritty of what this person's about. Like I said, more than anything else, if you know the young person or you know the user that you're working with and you think something's an individual important or they think it's important, find a way to include it. So that brings us to the end of the webinar. Just give you a few minutes to ask any questions. We have my colleague Dave on the chat and I'll also be able to answer a couple whilst we're here. Okay, so we've just had a question come through. One of the questions is, can you send things from Grid 3 to people who don't have Grid 3, such as my daughter's teacher? So let's have a look. Absolutely, that is something that is possible. So if I go to my settings within Grid, I can go to computer, and here on the right hand side we have some options to choose our devices. So what that means is essentially third-party devices that you will be controlling from your device. So things like a camera, so using the webcam to take photos, you can set this up. Or oh, sorry, I've just realised I've not changed the screen. So on this page here, let me show how you get there again. So if I go to menu and then settings, you can see here we've got our devices, so your cameras, and also then the option to choose a printer. If you have a PDF printer installed on your computer, which most Windows computers do, or you can get some free downloads from the website, you can choose the option Print PDF. If I now go to my print option, I've got the option here for my PDF printer, choose print, and instead of coming out a printer as a hard copy, here I have the option to save it as a PDF. I could then save this, save, and then send this as an email, pop it on a USB stick and share it to anyone who has a Windows device. Which leads on nicely to the second question. Will this work on iPad? So absolutely. If you've got an iPad with Grid for iPad, you have access to online grids, and the write text command is one of the commonly used commands available on Grid for iPad. Download the grid set, edit it in exactly the same way we've done today. And if you do need to print it out, just use the screenshot function on your iPad, so holding down the home button and your lock button at the same time, saves it as an image, and then you can email it or print it out. Okay. So just give a couple of seconds, see if we've got any more questions come in. I think that is it. So if you do have any other questions, you can come along and ask. So message us through our community. We have a Smartbox community available on Facebook. Really, really great resource for technical queries and just generally any queries you have. Our members are lovely. Or you can email the support team. If you do make a communication passport, obviously, if you don't, try not to include too much personal information. It would be really nice if you could let us know on the community that you've had success with it. And like I said, if there's no personal information included, if you could share with us what you've done, what you've done well, and what you find tricky, and generally the benefits of using it. Be good to hear. We send out an email at the end of the webinar with a link to this webinar, but also a link to the communication passport template we've used today. The template will be also featured within the Online Grids community for a couple of weeks for you to get your hands on, and then it will be available to search after that. Okay, we look forward to seeing you all at our next webinars. Thank you very much.